Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going over the PGA nominees and discussing what it means for the Best Picture at the Oscars. Now, it's been a couple days since the PGA nominees have been announced, and I did make predictions on the Awards Expert app, but I didn't because the PGA got delayed, and then I didn't realize when it was getting announced, so I didn't really get to, save all of that and then do a proper reaction because I just saw I just saw the list before I got to actually, blind react to it. So, this isn't necessarily a reaction video. I already know what the PGA 10 is. We're just going to do a little bit of discussion on it. So let's take a look here at what was nominated at the PGA, and it's Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, A Real Pain, September 5, The Substance, and Wicked. And so my predictions, I had the top 8 that we've all kind of settled into, right? So I had the top 8. I then had Sing Sing at 9, and I knew something crazy was going to happen at 10, so I didn't pick Nickel Boys, and I didn't pick September 5 or A Real Pain, which were kind of the should have been kind of the next obvious ones. I reached for Challengers, was what I put in as my 10 spot, because I just thought that something crazy would happen at the PGA. And I guess, to be fair, the something crazy was September 5. All of a sudden now this is a film that is been kind of dead and ignored, and we're not really talking about it outside of kind of like the one Globe nomination. It hasn't really been anywhere. Now all of a sudden, right at the end here, getting a PGA nomination, all of a sudden that's a big kind of swing and a big hit for this film. And so as I'm recording this Sunday the 19th, hopefully I'm recording it the same day that I'm actually going to upload this video as well. But so it was a couple days ago that Oscar nomination voting period actually ended. So we've reached the point where all of the information that we have so far across all of these different various award bodies, that's all the information that we're going to get, that we can even factor into what we can predict for the Oscars. So between now and I think it's Thursday when the Oscar nominations are announced, anything that happens, big shakeups or anything from now till then, none of that is going to affect, what's going on. For example, all of a sudden this big bombshell or so about AI potentially being used in The Brutalist and Amelia Perez, that doesn't matter. Oscar voting is already over, so in terms of what's going to get nominated, there's nothing that can change what's already been. And so in today's video, I just want to kind of take a look at everything that we've got from the PGA, DGA, Globes, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, SAG, AFI, NBR, everything. Take all of that and look at what it means for what we think is going to get nominated for Best Picture on Thursday. Now, all of the research that I did in this video is next to nothing. All of my research comes from this tweet from Matt Neglia. I'm sure if you guys have seen, if you're watching my videos at all in any capacity, you know who Matt Neglia is. There's no way you've stumbled across my videos and don't know what Next Best Picture podcast is, but there's going to be links in the description to all, some Matt's social media and the Next Best Picture podcast, their YouTube channel, their podcast website, everything. So make sure to give them a follow, because again, without Matt Neglia posting this nice little organized tweet for me, it saved me a little bit of research that I would have had to do on my own. So that's all the information. I'm just pulling this off of Matt Neglia's tweet. But what we're going to do here in the rest of this video is I'm going to break up each of these films, the films that we're going to discuss. We're going to go over them. I've broken them up. There's 25 films here that I think have any sort of Best Picture hopes or aspirations that, not just as of right now, but over the course of, the last couple months. There's 25 films we're going to talk about, and I've broken them up into 6 tiers. So we're going to go tier by tier and talk about what films I think are in each category in terms of their chances at Best Picture. So the first tier we have is Tier 1. These are the Best Picture contenders. These are the films that we really have to kind of focus on in terms of what might actually win. The first film is The Brutalist. The Brutalist has gotten the AFI, the American Film Institute Top 10 nomination, BAFTA, the Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Drama, New York Films Critics, and PGA. Up next is Amelia Perez, which has the AFI Top 10, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Musical or Comedy, PGA, and SAG. Then we have Anora, which has the AFI, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Musical or Comedy, LA Film Critics, and National Board of Review, PGA, and SAG. And last is Conclave, which has the AFI, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Drama, NBR, PGA, and SAG. And again, these are kind of the four obvious frontrunners, right? These are the four that right now, in a lot of other years, in previous years at the Oscars, we kind of maybe already know if it's an Oppenheimer situation, we know what's kind of sweeping, or even like in years past, we maybe have the power of the dog, we have a frontrunner that we're kind of maybe a little uneasy about, and so it's like we're kind of looking for kind of what could be the next contender. This year is so unique in the sense that like I don't think there is a frontrunner at this point. It could be any one of those four films. I think if you had to pick a frontrunner, like I did, I put The Brutalist and Amelia Perez were kind of my 1-2. I think those are the two that are maybe the biggest frontrunners, but these are the four that I'm not shocked if any of these four win Best Picture. And then moving on to tier 2, this is the There Is Still Time tier. This is where I'm putting the movies that we don't necessarily consider them right in that top four. We don't consider them as the absolute frontrunner for Best Picture, but these are the ones I'm not ruling out, given, if they can get some little bit more momentum. These are the ones that I think maybe there's still a shot, and maybe there's a chance that these could win Best Picture. And so first we're going with A Complete Unknown. A Complete Unknown has AFI, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Drama, NBR, PGA, and SAG. And so the reason I have A Complete Unknown here in tier 2 as opposed to in tier 1, I think is solely just at this point kind of based on the perception of the film. Is that we kind of initially, when we were all making our best 10, our predictions for Best Picture back in December, a lot of us had A Complete Unknown kind of in that like 11, 12, 13 range. And so it took a little bit, I think, for us to kind of just admit like, okay, it was creeping in and it was going to be in the top 10. And then all of a sudden it just kept continuing to get more and more nominations to the point that we were moving it up and up and up and up. And so I think it's firmly moved itself into this tier 2, like I said, but with the potential of, as it continues to get this momentum, if it can start getting a couple big wins at all of these different bodies that it is nominated at, if it can get a couple wins, there is a chance to move it up into tier 1. And initially, I almost only put A Complete Unknown by itself in this tier. I was really close, but ultimately, kind of looking at Matt Neglia's tweet and seeing all of the different awards that Wicked has, I felt like Wicked deserves to be in tier 2 as well. It has AFI, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Musical Comedy, NBR, PGA, and SAG. And Wicked, I think, is kind of the opposite of A Complete Unknown, where Wicked was kind of the big front runner initially, and then it's kind of just, since it hasn't really been kind of winning things, The Brutalist, Amelia Perez, Anora, Conclave, those four have kind of been winning at a higher clip and have been racking up more awards. It seems like maybe the passion for Wicked is slowly starting to dwindle. So I think A Complete Unknown is moving up in towards tier 1. Wicked is maybe moving down towards tier 3, but I do think that there is still time for Wicked. Where it is right now, it does still have so many nominations and it is well respected amongst these critic groups that I think that there is still a chance that if Wicked can just get a couple big wins here or there, it could propel itself back into that tier 1 contention. And then moving on to tier 3, this is the tier where the nomination is secured, but it doesn't really have a shot at Best Picture. And the two films we're talking about in this category, Dune Part 2 has AFI, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Drama, and PGA. This is one of those, just a film that its Best Picture chances were just devastated by this releasing so early in the year back in March. We thought that because of how good the film was, it was going to carry and it was going to continue into Oscar season, and it just appears as if that's not the case. It is still going to be a player in the technical and craft categories, but it just seems like in terms of above-the-line nominations, it really is going to get into picture solely based off of the nomination total that it's going to get in the below-the-line categories, and maybe it's got like a screenplay and best case scenario, Denis Villeneuve does get a surprise director nomination, but it just seems like this film, it has enough of the momentum to get that nomination and has that locked up, but it doesn't seem like it's got any sort of wins or momentum to propel it into winning contention. And the second film in this tier is The Substance. Now, The Substance has Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Musical or Comedy, and PGA. The Substance is another one that, even for me, as The Substance is my favorite film in the Best Picture race, as much as I love the film, when I saw it, at no point did I ever think that this was even really an Oscars player. I just thought that this was a fun movie that the Academy was going to ignore. So this is one of those where the entire time it feels like the nomination in Best Picture is the win for this film, and it does seem that at this point it is kind of locked into that 8th slot. It does seem like it is getting into Best Picture. There's no shot that it misses, I don't think, but it does seem like it's just there isn't really much of a contention or any opportunity for it to win Best Picture. However, there is opportunity for Demi Moore and, maybe some of the, makeup and a couple other nominations here and there. It has a shot in those categories. So in terms of just like Oscar turnout and Oscar success, I don't think the film is super concerned about winning Best Picture as much as it is about winning its other categories. Now, Tier 4 is the exciting tier to talk about in this video because this is the tier of films that are fighting for the nomination. If you've noticed, we just listed 8 films that I think are pretty much locked for the nomination, and this is a kind of a consensus. I think a lot of people kind of have those 8 films locked. What you need to do then is you need to go into this tier and find 2 more films that you would pick for those final 2 slots. So I have 4 films here that I think we're choosing between. The 4 films are Real Pain, which was nominated for AFI, Golden Globe Musical Comedy, NBR, and PGA. Now, A Real Pain is one of those films that I think initially we had it in that top 10, and it has we quickly kind of dismissed it once it missed a couple here and there. We thought, okay, so A Real Pain's not happening, we kicked it out. And then all of a sudden now, with the big PGA nomination, now a lot of us are like, oh, maybe this is back in. And I think A Real Pain is one of those that I think not only maybe is it back in, it might be the one that I'm most comfortable with kind of putting in that 9 spot. The next film we're talking about is Sing Sing, which was nominated at AFI, Critics' Choice, and NBR. And now Sing Sing is kind of the same as Real Pain, but even like to a bigger extent. Where I think Sing Sing, which technically was out in film festivals last year, so a lot of people have seen this for a long time and have been kind of beating the drum and singing its praises, and so then it comes into this year, and so I think a lot of people from the get-go were like, oh, this is a Best Picture nominee, and so I think we've just kind of put it in there, and it's stayed there the entire award season, and now we're getting into actual nomination season, and we're finding out maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't getting into all these Best Pictures. Maybe it isn't one of those locked in 10, and it's now getting to the point where we're kind of at this point, it seems like it is hanging on by a thread. This is one of those years where I think in years past the Oscars, you could nominate anywhere between 8 to 10. This is a year that I think in previous years we would have only nominated 8, but because there's a guaranteed 10 this year, you have to find one of these 2, and so things like Sing Sing that maybe don't have as much momentum going for it could still kind of be saved just by the fact that there is 10. The next film we're talking about is Nickel Boys. Nickel Boys has AFI, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe Drama, and National Society of Film Critics. Nickel Boys is kind of similar to Sing Sing in the sense that it is this smaller budget personal drama that I think a lot of people passionately love, in sort of, the letterbox community or film Twitter. It's a film that a lot of people love, but we're seeing that it just isn't necessarily resonating with these awards bodies, and it's just not getting in anywhere. And so I do think that maybe Nickel Boys, again, is another one of those films that maybe has a chance because of the fact that the Oscars will nominate 10 films in Best Picture, where a lot of these other bodies where it isn't getting nominated, they typically only have 5 or 6 nominees, and so that's kind of the hope if you're rooting for Nickel Boys, is you just have to hope that it has always kind of been firmly in this 8 to 10 range, and that it does still have a chance. But again, it's the thing with all of these films in this tier. There's not great arguments for why or against any of these. You just kind of have to pick 2 of them. And the final film we're talking about in this tier is September 5. Now, September 5 has Golden Globe Drama and PGA. So September 5 is kind of this weird example of where it got the Golden Globe nomination in drama, the kind of the first big precursor, but that was the film's one and only nomination. And so we kind of were looking at it as maybe a little fluky because it couldn't get into any other category at Golden Globe. And then it just missed every other awards body. Not only did it miss BAFTA, it missed like BAFTA long lists. Like it's a film that was just nowhere to be seen. And I think a lot of us were kind of comfortable just writing it off. And then right at the end, it gets that PGA nomination. So September 5 is another one that isn't a great case for why you think you should pick it. But again, the 9 and 10 slots for Best Picture this year, there just isn't great arguments for why you should pick them. It's just kind of a gut thing. You're just going to have to look at these 4 and pick 2 of them. Now, moving into Tier 5, this is what I'm calling the darkest of dark horses. If you are incredibly bold and you look at those 4 that I just listed in Tier 4 and you just are saying, I don't think any of these or maybe only one of those 4 is getting in, and you want to be bold and you want to do something crazy and pick something from this tier, by all means go for it. These are films that aren't necessarily dead, but these are the ones that would be a shock if they did get nominated, but there is some hope or some chance. First one is Challengers, which has Golden Globe Musical Comedy as its only real nomination of note. Challengers, it has the opportunity at the Oscars of maybe getting a screenplay nomination, maybe getting score, maybe getting original song, and so it's one of those that you think in a best case scenario it's got 3, and then you have to root for an even bigger best case scenario where it actually sneaks into a couple other spots, and maybe that can correlate to a best picture nomination, which I don't think so. That's why it's in tier 5. Next up is Nosferatu, a film that hasn't gotten like anything. No awards bodies have been acknowledging it until the BAFTA. Not only did they acknowledge it, they acknowledged it 5 different times in 5 different categories. So Nosferatu, I think, belongs in this kind of dark horse categories of maybe there's a world where it just happens to really overperform Oscar nomination morning, gets a bunch of craft categories, and maybe that love is enough for it to kind of edge out a couple of those films in tier 4. Next up is All We Imagine Is Light. The only real kind of nomination that this film has gotten is the Golden Globe Director nomination for Payal Kapadia. I think All We Imagine Is Light is a film that people wanted to kind of have as this dark horse contender that maybe, as long as it just kind of lurked around and it wouldn't get acknowledged to other awards bodies, but once it got to the Oscars would be the branch that was cool enough to award it and give it a bunch of these nominations. This is one where, again, I don't, if that's something that you're predicting, you kind of have to just be bold and predict that, because that whole strategy, that whole plan all along was that there was never really going to be concrete evidence that this was happening. It was more so just a gut feeling that you would have to ride with. The fourth film in this tier is Kneecap. Now, Kneecap is a film that has been, as much as I said All We Imagine Is Light has kind of not been anywhere, Kneecap really hasn't been anywhere in almost any other category or any other awards bodies until the BAFTA, where it got 6 nominations. Now, as I was reacting to the BAFTA nominations, Kneecap was kind of the film that was reminding me a little bit of All Quiet on the Western Front, where it was kind of just DOA until BAFTA. BAFTA revived it, got so many nominations, and then the Academy swooped in and said, yeah, we agree. Now, Kneecap, I think, ultimately fell short, obviously, of the All Quiet on the Western Front buzz, because I think All Quiet on the Western Front was double digits. It led BAFTA, most nominations. Kneecap only got 6, so it didn't quite make that mark, but I do think it made a big enough of a mark that when it comes to the Oscars, I'm going to have to look at it in a couple different categories and strongly consider it in a couple different spots, because I think it's rare to see something get 6 nominations at BAFTA and then be completely ignored at the Oscar. And the fifth and final film in Tier 5 is I'm Still Here. Now, I'm Still Here is another one that really does not have a whole lot of nominations or a whole lot of wins at any of these precursors, except for the Fernando Torres win at the Golden Globes. So I think you combine the Fernando Torres win plus the insane passion that people have for this film, as much like how much people love this film, the ones that have been able to see it. They love it so much that I think that maybe if there is enough of them in the Academy as well, that maybe it does kind of get a couple surprise votes here and there in some categories. And that is, again, if you are feeling so bold that you think enough people maybe in the Academy voted for this as like kind of that 10th spot in Best Picture, maybe there's a shot. But again, it's one of those that you would have to be just incredibly bold and calling your shot in order for any of these films to be what you're predicting in the Best Picture 10. And the final tier that we're talking about, Tier 6, this is in another timeline. These are films that at some point have had any sort of momentum or had any sort of aspirations for a Best Picture nomination that ultimately just didn't materialize. So the first film we're talking about is Gladiator 2. In Gladiator 2, the only real mention it had this award season was NBR. Next up is Baby Girl. Same thing, all it really ever had was NBR. And then we have Blitz. This is one that didn't even get NBR or any other real nomination at any other precursor, but the reason we're putting it here is because this is one of those that at the beginning of the year people thought this would be a serious contender. A Steve McQueen, Saoirse Ronan pairing, people thought this was going to be a massive player that ultimately just never materialized. Next up is Queer, which, you guessed it, only has NBR, followed immediately by Juror Number 2 with only NBR, and the next one, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, which, you guessed it, only received an NBR mention. And now the final two in this category that we're talking about, The Apprentice and The Last Showgirl. I'm going to talk about these kind of together because these are films that maybe there was some little bit of buzz a little while ago, and then it kind of just went away, and then the only reason that they kind of still are hanging on or getting a little bit of the mention is solely because they now have acting nominations that seem to kind of be coming in and having a shot at getting nominated at the Oscars. And the reason I'm talking about it, because every year there's films that get a acting nomination, and you can get one acting nomination and have no real shot at Best Picture. But I think anytime that you're getting 2 acting nominations, I think that does is enough for you to try and, say that you're on the extreme long list for Best Picture. So The Apprentice, it seems like Jeremy Strong is the most likely that's happening, and maybe Sebastian Stan has a shot. We don't know for sure yet, but that is something that, I'm not completely ruling that out. And so if it gets both, I think it deserves some sort of mention here. But again, in another timeline, it's not this timeline that we're in that's going to nominate it. And then the same thing with The Last Showgirl. I think Jamie Lee Curtis is the one that is a little bit more likely, but I do think that there is still a shot at for Pamela Anderson. And when I think of The Last Showgirl, I think this is reminding me so much of Nyad last year, where again you get the two late, your lead actress and supporting actress, and then it kind of elevated your film into the kind of that 15-ish range for Best Picture, but never really had a shot. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on the PGA nominations and what you think is going to happen with those final 2 slots for Best Picture at the Oscars. And let me know just any other big, bold predictions you're going to make in your Oscar nomination predictions. I believe that will be the next video on my channel, just to give you kind of a heads up of what's coming. I think in the next couple days I'll post that video of my Oscar nominations predictions. And then on Thursday I should be posting my reaction video to the Oscar nominations. I do have to work that morning, so I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to get it to work. I think I'm going to have enough time to maybe react and then just upload an uncut, unedited reaction video, and then within the next couple days after that kind of do a little bit more of a actual breakdown or talking about the nominations type of video. But again, we'll see. But that's pretty much this whole week is just going to be Oscar predictions and nominations related content for you. So if you would like to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those videos, I would greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.